Hi, this is your friendly neighborhood man in Magenta wig. Now, if you watched my little behind the scenes video that I posted a while back, I mentioned that my next podcast video would be something controversial. Well, I'm actually not going to do that one yet because I got a request to do another Bag of Music Swag video, and something special in particular, so this time, instead of Bag of Music Swag, it's going to be the Crate of Beatles Swag. So some of these things you may have seen before in my previous videos. I might have shown them off in the past. Some things you haven't seen yet. So you know what, I'm just going to dig through this crate and see what I can find here. Alright, starting simple enough, introducing the Beatles. Now, funny enough, I actually got this for $1. This was actually in the dollar bin at the exchange. Not actually sure why, I think someone made a mistake, but thanks to the exchange. This one was also from the dollar bin at the exchange. I think they put it in there because someone scribbled all over the cover. This is actually just one of those shameless Tony Sheridan-era cash-in albums. You know, the Beatles are only on like 3 songs, even though they're the biggest thing on the cover. Alright, here's Yesterday and Today, the mono version. The reason I bought the mono version in particular, now, if I remember, the record inside that I put inside this cover, just for a place to store it, is colored vinyl, and I'll show you why. Let's put that aside here. Now, this I think I did show in a couple previous videos. This is a reproduction butcher cover that was made sometime over the past few years, and the reason I bought the legitimate mono version is the colored vinyl version was actually inside this cover, but I wanted to make my butcher cover a little more legitimate by putting a real mono version of the album inside, so yeah, that's why I just swapped them. Now, something I always wonder about Sgt. Pepper, though, is did anyone actually cut these out? I mean, seriously, every copy of Sgt. Pepper I've ever handled in my lifetime had this intact. Just something I wondered. Alright, 1962 to 1966, and this one is the red vinyl version. Now, the guy I bought this from, I got this at a record convention. The guy I bought this from actually had the Blue Album too, on blue vinyl, but I didn't buy it for some reason. I think the cover had like a big obvious tear in it or something, and it just didn't seem worth the money. But yeah, what I'd actually like to get in Japan, I think, a company that wasn't actually directly connected to the Beatles put out a third-party third volume to this called 1960 to 1962. It has a similar kind of cover, but it's green, and of course that one came out on green vinyl as well to match. So that's a nice little item to have. I've never actually seen a copy in person, but I have seen it online, so I know it does exist. So yeah, 1960, 1962, the lost entry to that series. It is out there. This one I see pretty commonly. This is another Tony Sheridan era cash-in, but this is an Italian compilation. I think half of it's Tony Sheridan stuff, the other half is Star Club material, but like I said, this is pretty common, so if you ever wanted to pick this up, you know, check your local record shop, because I have seen this quite a few times. Timeless, picture disc, you know, I'm gonna assume this was basically a John has just died, let's rush out as much material as we can, like third-party cash-in thing, judging by the timing and the release date of this. But yeah, it's a nice picture disc. I don't know if I ever played it. I think it's just interviews and, you know, Beatles cover versions and stuff. I don't think there's actual like Beatle music on it, but yeah, nice picture disc. This is a nice find. This is I think it's a German greatest hits. Yeah, German greatest hits album. I think 1964 this came out, called The Beatles Beat. And speaking of foreign greatest hits albums, I have this one as well, Beatles Greatest. I've also seen a copy of this. There's a very odd version of this with a cover showing the Beatles as old men. It's like a drawing of the Beatles as old men, but I don't have that one. I do have that image on another album though, which I'll show off in a minute here. It amuses me because I've seen collectors sell this album for like ridiculously high amounts of money. This was like I think a made-for-TV compilation that has Nowhere Man on it. I think it was like the first compilation album that ever used a Beatles song. That's the only material they have on it is just Nowhere Man. But I mean, you can tell by the sticker I actually paid $1 for this, and I think the last time I looked through a dollar bin at the exchange, they had about 5 copies of this. So if you ever see this for a ridiculously high price, call them out on it, because this really is not worth much of anything. Alright, now we're getting into the really obscure stuff here. This is the unreleased 1985 album Sessions, which was supposed to come out in the mid-'80s, basically scraping together an album using Beatles material no one had heard yet. This is one of, I think, 3 cover variations on the bootlegs of the time. This actually isn't what the official cover looked like. I think the official cover was the one you may have seen. It's like blue and red stripes, has a real colorful image of the Beatles on the front. But yeah, this is actually a great little album. I think it really would have impressed people at the time. You know, it really holds together. They did kind of Frankenstein and remix these outtakes a bit, and I mean these versions actually came out on the anthologies years later as well. But you know, they did go out of their way to try to polish up some things that weren't exactly finished sounding. So I do commend them for that. But yeah, it actually is a real shame that this didn't come out, you know, in the mid-'80s when people were real hungry for new Beatles material after John's passing. I think this really would have knocked the hell out of people. Here's another odd one. It's supposed to look like a Capitol Records album called Not Guilty. This was actually the bootleg that debuted George's song Not Guilty, which was a White Album outtake, at like chipmunk speed. Like, the speed is way off on this, but yeah. It's a nice looking cover. Looks legit, you know, looks like an album that would have come out in the mid-'60s. Content-wise, it's basically a lot of like outfakes of Rain. You know, claiming to have all these different takes of Rain that are just like the left channel and the right channel of the song we know and stuff. But, you know, filler material. But, you know, it is an attractive item, though. Old style bootleg here, one of those good old one-color covers. You know, the song list is actually handwritten on the back. This is an album called L.S. Bumblebee, which claimed to have a rare Beatles song called L.S. Bumblebee, which actually isn't the Beatles at all. But, you know, with early 70s bootlegs, that happened an awful lot. I'm sure a lot of you fans have heard the song Peace of Mind. Have You Heard the Word was another one, which I actually have the 45 of somewhere. Maybe I'll show that in another video. Yeah, I actually have the 45 by The Fut somewhere. Alright, the legendary Revolution Take Your Knickers Off bootleg, which actually was the debut of the 10-minute version of Revolution 1. Now, we had kind of heard that before. There's a bootleg that circulated for years of Yoko doing like an audio diary during the White Album sessions, and you can hear the Beatles playing back the 10-minute take in the background. This actually had the first clean copy of that, with no Yoko on top, just a direct recording of that. So that was very cool, because we got to hear for the first time how Revolution 1 and Revolution 9 used to be one track, and then it got split into 2. You know, it started out as a normal song, and it just got crazier and crazier, and eventually the music dropped out, and it was just, you know, the sound collage. So, yeah, historical item here. Fairly well-known one, Five Nights in a Judo Arena. Probably, I think this is the best quality Beatles live recording around. Not the best performance, you know, this was getting towards the end of their touring days, but I think, like, audio quality-wise, this is the best one. And getting back to Sessions, this is a very well-known one called File Under Beatles that I just picked up. I think this is a reissue, because the original cover wasn't quite so fancy. This one actually has a gatefold and stuff, but the story about this is, though, about a decade or so before the Sessions album was going to come out, some, you know, record label executives wanted more Beatles material out on the market. They wanted new Beatles material, so this was basically a preliminary attempt to put together like a unreleased material compilation. Some of this stuff ended up on Sessions, some of it didn't. This actually isn't the album, like, directly. What this is someone actually had a tape recorder under the table while these executives were playing back the album that they were working on. So you literally hear people like drumming their fingers on the table, and you know the quality's about what you would expect. But it is interesting to hear. 1967, which is a collection of Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour outtakes, made to look legit, you know, alternate Sgt. Pepper picture. They actually have the lyrics to all the outtakes on the back, and there's actually a Parlophone label on the record itself, so, you know, it looks completely genuine. This is Return to Abbey Road. Basically the Abbey Road album made of outtakes. You know, again, claims to be a legitimate Apple Records release. You know, very, very cool. I mean, better versions of these outtakes, better copies have turned up over the years, but this is still a hell of an album, especially if you want to hear, you know, where collectors were in the early 80s, you know, what was circulating at the time. Alright. And finally, my favorite bootlegs, because the covers are so cool. In the late 80s, a fan from Australia, I think? Yeah, Australia. Put together a series of alternate albums, basically an alternate version of each Beatles album using whatever outtakes and live recordings from that album were available in the late 80s. And each one had a really inventive cover, you know, sometimes just an alternate cover photo compared to the actual album, sometimes, you know, a funny parody. So here we go. We got Reintroducing the Beatles, Please Release Me, Withered Beatles. This is actually the same drawing on that odd pressing of Beatles Greatest I was talking about before. A Night's Hard Day, Beatles for Auction. This one I believe I've showed off in a previous Bag of Music swag. Rabbi Saul, the legendary Rabbi Saul bootleg cover. Revolting. Now, this one actually has no Revolver outtakes because there weren't any circulating at the time. This is actually a really cool album where he took unreleased material from the Get Back sessions, you know, trimmed it down to just the songs, cut out all the chatter and stuff. So, yeah, this is actually one of the best compilations if you want to hear, like, leftovers from the Get Back / Let It Be project. Okay, this is a twofer. Dr. Pepper on the back, Tragical History Tour on the front. The Little Red Album, Mellow Yellow. Unfortunately, my copy of this isn't the best one because the label's actually stamped onto the vinyl at one point, but it's okay. This one's mostly just interview material and stuff anyway. Another one with the Beatles walking the other way. This is Broad Road. Very similar album to Return to Abbey Road. I think there's a couple additional songs. This is Hey Julian. Let It End. This is actually a solo collection called Lifting Material from the World. Each Beatle gets their own side of material, so of course each Beatle gets their own little faux album cover here. This one was actually made by the same person, but it's not, you know, it's not a parody cover or anything. This is called Grave Posts. This is just, you know, Get Back session era material. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look into the crate of Beatles swag. Believe it or not, this is only about half of my Beatles stuff. Basically all I could fit into the crate at one time. If you want to see a part 2 of this, let me know. And until then, I'm going to keep working on videos. I have a bunch in the queue that I want to work on, including the controversial podcast. So I'm going to get working on those in the coming weeks. Until then, bye!